let's get a little more into this of like, I think that's where a lot of people are going to have the issue you brought up of like, what's the a good example or the real difference in not encouraging failure, but encouraging innovation, occurring risk different from allowing substandard performance? Because I think anybody in anything would know, well, how do you do that? It's a slippery slope. We want people to be innovative. We want them to always be improving, but we don't want to encourage mediocrity. We don't want to say the standard's not the standard and we're not going to hold ourselves to it. But at the same time, you're right. Like if we're doing the same thing tomorrow that we did today, then a month will be outdated, even in medicine. If you're doing the same thing you did 5 years ago, medicine has passed you by and you're
Right.
probably not doing standard of care anymore. So, do you have a good example of like how either defining those or a good example of somebody or an organization that really towed that line really well?
Yeah, I mean, there are a huge number of examples. I would say that first is the question is, what does it look like? And again, we're not lowering the standard. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not saying, okay, well, it's okay if your example of baseball, right? It's okay if 2 out of 3 kids that go to the OR to have a VSD closure don't make it, right? Like, that's not what we're talking
Yeah.
about. We're talking about, again, getting back to what I said earlier, thoughtful, calculated risk and recognizing that a zero mistake environment is a non-learning environment. It's a difference when somebody looks at an opportunity and sees a potential for improvement and tries something and that doesn't work out.
Maybe even if it wasn't a mistake,
Right,
but like, how could this have done better?
right.
Yeah.
Versus a fear of failure
Hmm.
and never trying that. So I wrote a paper and we published that in the Annals of Surgery in 2020. And it's the title is, I think, something like Sacrificing the Future for the Sake of the Present. And I was talking about congenital heart surgery. Specifically, in the past, people, our field, like most of heart surgery, period, owes its origin to congenital heart surgery. So coronary artery bypass and valve replacements and all these things can be traced to what was done for children with congenital heart disease. And it was people doing things that were risky. They were risky, and they were able to create treatments for things that were untreatable. And children went from dying to having a 95% likelihood of living to be adults and be productive and have families and all this sort of stuff. And it changed the whole picture because those people were willing to take calculated, risky opportunities to do something better, to improve. And there was a lot of difficult outcomes as a result of that. But again, they were calculated, thoughtful, in conversation with other people. It wasn't a lone ranger off doing one thing without discussing this in broad groups. And that continues today. But if we look at congenital heart surgery over the last, I mean, during my career, there hasn't been any monstrous innovation. What we see is especially the influence of ranking systems like US News and World Report. And those ranking systems, frankly, are geared to sell ads and other things. But the existence of those ranking systems has created a system where nobody can fail because if they fail, their rank goes down and fewer patients will go there, right? So those centers that used to innovate and lead the world in advancing care now are pulling back from advancing care, from doing those innovative things to get us that much further along in medicine. Because if they make a mistake, it has very significant repercussions on their standing. And so what you see is the great surgeons are in the past or are soon to be. And those surgeons that are now out, they're not allowed to do the more challenging, like a Norwood or things, right? Like oh no, that has to be done by surgeon A who's been here a really long time. Right? Well, surgeon A is going to die or retire or something at some point. Somebody needs to know how to do that. Well, can't do that because surgeon A's got the best numbers. So surgeon B and C don't get to do that surgery. And so then you're left with a group of people who aren't as technically capable as that past generation. So anyway, so this idea has really significant repercussions in medicine and other fields. And again, I'm not advocating for loose cannons. I'm not advocating for incapable people doing things. In fact, what I'm advocating for creates more capable people. They have to have the opportunity to make a mistake because if they don't, they will never learn, they'll never develop that skill. and we're talking about congenital heart surgery right now, but that applies everywhere. So a different example, I'm reminded of, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, right? Tom Watson was the head of IBM. And there's this story that there was a guy that worked at IBM and he had made a mistake that, again, 50s or 60s, cost IBM something like $10 million. Okay. I
It's a lot
mean,
in the 50s and 60s.
that's a lot. I
It's
mean,
a
that's a
lot
lot
today.
now, dude. You know? And so $10 million. So he shows up at Watson's office and he says, you know, sir, I made this mistake and, you know, I'm here to
I'll pack
apologize.
my stuff.
You're right. And it's like,
I'll show
you know,
myself out.
right. I recognize that this cost me my job. And so he turns around to get ready to leave. And when Watson says, I'm not going to let you leave after we've just spent $10 million educating you.
Hmm.
Right. Like how many organizations today would look at it that way?